I had three situations that I thought were interesting in terms of, immediate usefulness. The first of which was I started to have it search through documents related to optical illusions, specifically because we have a museum exhibit coming up that's supposed to be full of it's supposed to be, how does the eye work, how does light work, and for our visitors we want them to reach at least a level 2 within the next generation science standards understanding of light and vision while giving them a very entertaining experience. And something I encountered was that there's quite a bit of disagreement within the research community over why optical illusions happen. And, if you're familiar at all with medical research, medical papers, this is not my field. This is not something I have experience in whatsoever. I happen to be relatively capable with research, but I do need a little bit of background, especially in medical reasons, to find what I wanted to look for. And I think it was either the second or the third document that I ran through research work pulled out a couple of terms right on the top line takeaways that ended up being very useful to me because it quickly identified parts of the brain that I should focus. If you ask somebody, how does vision work? If you ask a doctor or an ophthalmologist, they'll give you 30 different parts of the brain and say, well, it's all these working together. Well, I needed something a little more specific because we're trying to distill it to concrete things we can have people learn, and investigate beyond. So it immediately identified for me, it was the parahippocampal cortex, which immediately led me on a way of understanding how our brain works with vision that I hadn't tripped to before, was beyond normally what they teach people, and was still interesting and something that we could bring into the exhibit, and I'm looking forward to. So the reason I bring it up is because you mentioned earlier, in your jet engine example of attempting to go from, 50,000 pages of potential causes of sound and identifying the ones either most germane or most risky to the situation or that, and drilling it down. And that's something that with a little bit of, working through the documents and research work, it gave me some terms that I was able to do additional research beyond, which led me to a useful nugget of information. So that worked in that case. The other thing I wanted to bring up was I asked my wife, Dr. Carter, if she would like to play with the system a little bit and see, what she could learn from what the system took away. And she came up with two interesting personal use cases for the system, whereas she fed it a couple of her own research papers and some of the research papers from her field. And she was immediately able to generate using the note system. She was able to generate what she considered, as an expert in her field, was a perfectly good introduction and top line summary of some more complicated work. Now, she did mention that, when you really got down into the weeds, an expert may take issue with a couple of terms and how they were used, which is not unexpected for, high jargon work.
Yeah, right.
But the takeaway within the larger, the introduction or the summary document was very good, she felt. Obviously there's room to improve there in any way. And again, a very, she works in exoplanet research, so it's an exceedingly specific field way outside of most. But anyways, the other thing she mentioned, and even a potential use case for her students she mentioned, was she was a bit surprised by some of the top line takeaways within her own work. And she conjectured that it might be useful to have a system like this, to actually have her students use a system like this, put their own work in, see what comes out, and then could question whether they had overemphasized certain things or not written it such that it was in an understandable fashion. If the top line most important takeaways came away and they were different than she expected, obviously she knows her own work like the back of her hand, that gave her reason to look at the work and question if she had potentially overemphasized something she didn't intend to, or had put terms close enough together that her as an expert obviously knew the differences, but somebody as a layperson or even as a journeyman within the field might come and come away with some misconceptions. And obviously but I've got a joke that's potentially a bit of human back propagation from the AI system, but I think that it was an interesting takeaway. And she's currently studying up for, they're doing small scale work at the college, seeing like, how is AI affecting how their students are learning, how can it be used, what are good practices obviously to bring it in, because people are going to use it whether or not they want them to within the college environment. LLMs are becoming ubiquitous for what I'm seeing and writing, and they're figuring out, how can we bring this up to a college level of understanding and proper use for what they expect from their students. And so she was investigating it partially as from that point of view. So anyways, those are three takeaways that I had.